no idea what happened in Djibouti 3 days ago. It's not on our radar screen. The only reason we paid attention to what happened in Mali is only because a group of terrorists hijacked the foreigners working in the oil fields in Nigeria, protesting why France attacked Mali. In Mali, exactly a year ago last March, the Taliban-like Islamists took over half the country and instituted Sharia law, exactly like what the Taliban did in Afghanistan. We in America had no clue. We were not paying attention. The national security issue is an American issue. It's not a Republican issue, it's not a Democratic issue, it's an American issue. The terrorists have attacked us under different administrations, regardless whatever administration happened to have Republican or Democrat. America was attacked the first time in 1979 under the Carter administration with the hostages in Iran. Carter was a Democrat. America was attacked again under the Ronald Reagan administration with the blowing up of the Marines in Lebanon. He was a Republican. America was attacked again under George Bush Sr. administration. America was attacked again under the Clinton administration. It was actually under the Clinton administration, a Democrat, that the World Trade Center was attacked the first time in 1993. It was also under President Clinton that the Taliban trained 10,000 Al-Qaeda members in Afghanistan. These people were not being trained for entertainment. They were being trained to attack the United States of America. At that time, George Bush Jr. and Dick Cheney were not even a blur on the political American landscape. And then, of course, America was attacked again under George Bush. And people started asking, why do they hate us? What did we do to offend the Islamic world? And they thought, if we just elect President Obama, all our sins are going to be forgiven. The whole world is going to sing Kumbaya. 2 days after President Obama became president, Al-Qaeda issued a press release saying, we continue our jihad against the United States, regardless of who lives in the White House. And since President Obama became president, and I'm talking 4 years ago, we have arrested on American soil 226 homegrown terrorists. 226 terrorists. 186 of them were Muslims. Now, we have a problem in this country when a faith-based group that accounts for less than 2% of the American population is responsible for over 80% of terrorist plots in the United States. This is a problem that we must address. As you can see, I'm very passionate about the national security issue. I am very passionate about it because it affected my life. You see, I was born and raised in Lebanon. My 9/11 happened to me in 1975 when the radical Islamists blew up my home, bringing it down, burying me under the rubble wounded as they shouted Allahu Akbar. I ended up in a hospital for 2.5 months. And as I laid in a hospital bed, wounded, going from one surgery to another, hooked up to IVs in both arms, I would ask my parents, why did they do this to us? And my father would tell me, because we are Christians, the Muslims consider us infidels and they want to kill us. So I learned since I was a 10-year-old little girl that I am wanted dead simply because I was born into the Christian faith and lived in a Christian town. Whether I practiced my religion or not, it was irrelevant in my enemy's eyes. I ended up leaving the hospital and coming back home. But my home was no longer the home I left. I ended up living underground in an 8x10 bomb shelter, without electricity, without water, and very little food. Because we were surrounded by Islamic radicals waiting to slaughter us. To get some food, we would crawl out of our bomb shelter and dig out for dandelions and dig out different vegetation and different greenery because it was the only greenery we had to eat. To get some water, we would crawl to a nearby spring because the Islamists cut off all water supplies to our towns. But thankfully, the town I lived in called Marjayoun, the Valley of Springs, we had 7 springs in our town. One of them was next to my house. We would crawl out of our bomb shelter to a nearby spring to get some water. And the reason why we had to crawl is because we were surrounded by Islamic snipers shooting at us. And every time before we left our bomb shelter to get some water, my parents and I would say our last goodbyes because we did not know if we're going to come back alive or dead just to get a drink of water. And when we would get to the spring, my mother had to use her stocking on top of the gallon of water to catch all the worms and all the junk and all the rocks and all the dirt so we could drink the water. And this became my existence. We knew what's going to happen to us because we heard from refugees, people who escaped, Christians who came to hide in our town, what our fate was going to be because we heard about the massacres that the Islamists were committing in the rest of the country. I remember when I was 13 years old, we were living in the bomb shelter for 3 years by that time. And one of our Christian friends stopped by and he said to us, Brigitte, I just want you to know that we heard on the radios a lot of chatter and we believe that the Islamists are organizing a major attack in our town tonight. And he said, if I don't see you tomorrow, I want to wish you a merciful death. And he gave me a hug and he left. And I remember at the age of 13 years old, putting on my Sunday best, my Easter dress, because I wanted to look pretty when I'm dead, knowing that when they come to slaughter me, there would be no one to bury me. And I remember sobbing as my mother combed my long black hair down to my hips and tied a white ribbon in my hair that matched the flowers in my dress. As I begged her, I don't want to die, I'm only 13 years old. And there was nothing my mother could say to me. And I remember sitting in the corner of our bomb shelter with my mother and my father. And we held each other's hands and my father started praying. He started praying from Psalms, reading the Bible. I shall walk into the valley of death and fear no evil, for thou art with me. And my parents said to me, if they come to slaughter us tonight, we'll create a distraction. We lived a long life. We'll create a distraction. You just run towards the Israeli border and never look back. Because you see, we lived 5 kilometers from the Israeli border. And we knew if we go to the Jews and beg for help, the Jews are not going to slaughter us because we had more shared values with them than we had with the Islamists. Thank God I did not have to make that difficult decision that night. Because that's the night when Israel came in physically into Lebanon and established the security zone and kicked out the Islamists away from our area and set up artillery bases around our town on the hills to protect us from the Islamists who are trying to invade our area. And this is how I went on living for another 5 years. And as we waited for the world to wake up and come save the Christians in Lebanon, I remember my father would listen to Radio Monte Carlo on a little transmission radio in the bomb shelter. And he would say, America's going to come save the Christians in Lebanon because they're going to see what's happening with the rise of radical Islamists. America didn't come. They would say, Britain is going to come, France is going to come, Australia is going to come, Canada is going to come. All these big Christian nations, they're going to see what's happening to the Christians of the Middle East. And nobody came. We ended up living like this till 1982, when Israel invaded Lebanon and went all the way into Beirut. They were working with the Christians to help the Christians take back their democracy, kick out the Islamic organizations operating in the country, and make peace between Israel and Lebanon. And that's when we came out of our bomb shelter and back to rebuilding our lives. By that time, I had been living in that bomb shelter for 7 years, from the age of 10 till the age of 17. Robbed of my youth. I ended up moving to Israel 2 years later in 1984 and becoming news anchor for world news in the Middle East, reporting on world events and reading the news night after night. And as I did that, that's from 1984 to 1989, I started realizing that every night I reported the news and I spoke about terrorist activities, no matter where the terrorist activity took place, the name of the perpetrators were always the same. Ahmed, Muhammad, Ali, Hussein. The name of the victims were always Westerners, Christians and Jews. Terry Wade, Terry Anderson, Colonel Higgins, the Achille Lauro, the TWA flights, the Pan Am flights. And I can go on and on. As a matter of fact, I have pages upon pages where I chronicled in my first book titled Because They Hate all the attacks against America and the West that the Islamists perpetrated. But America hit the snooze button and ignored the warning signs. And I started realizing that what I used to think was a regional problem between a majority Muslim Middle East trying to either kill or expel the minority Christians and Jews had become a worldwide problem. But the world was not paying attention. The world was not connecting the dots. The world lacked imagination. And isn't this exactly what the 9/11 Commission report said to us? We lacked imagination. It's not that we did not know that Al-Qaeda wants to attack the United States. We have never been faced with an enemy that is more open, more articulate, does not have hidden agendas. They not only tell us how much they hate us, they not only tell us what they want to do to us, they issue press releases about it, they put it on the internet, they record videos about it, and make sure they send it to Al Jazeera to air worldwide. But we ignored the warning signs. Al-Qaeda attacked the World Trade Center in 1993 the first time. We treated it like a police problem. They attacked us again in 1995 with our Kubar towers. We ignored it. In 1997, they attacked our embassies in Kenya and Tanzania. We ignored it. They attacked the U.S. school. We ignored it. And then they realized we were so asleep and so apathetic that they came back and re-attacked the World Trade Center in 2001, the exact same place, this time bringing it down and killing almost 3,000 Americans. At this point, we cannot say we lack imagination. We can no longer hide behind that. We have a problem that we need to address. And after the attacks of September 11th, people thought, why do they hate us? Why does the Islamic world hate us? And all the psychoanalysts came on television the next day and we heard all the psychobabble about, well, they hate us because we are in the Middle East. They hate us because we support Israel. That's why they hate us. That couldn't be further from the truth. They hate us because of some of these issues, but it's not what has instigated their attacks against us. In order for you to understand what launched all these attacks, you have to understand who's behind these attacks. Al-Qaeda happened to be one organization. So what's the mothership that launched all this radicalism around the world? Two things happened around the world in the last 30, 40 years that gave the Islamists the money and the power to organize and mobilize. And that's the discovery of oil in Saudi Arabia, which gave them the money to organize and mobilize, and Ayatollah Khomeini coming to power in Iran in 1979, which gave the spiritual support to the Islamic movement to grow worldwide. So, who is the organization responsible for birthing this rebirth of Islamic radicalism worldwide? It's an organization that you are very familiar with, that you have heard a lot on television lately. It's called the Muslim Brotherhood. The Muslim Brotherhood was founded in Egypt in 1928. They didn't start 10 years ago. 1928, and has 70 offshoot Islamic organizations around the world, including Al-Qaeda and Hamas. So why was the Muslim Brotherhood founded in 1928? I mean, if they hate us because we support Israel, if they hate us because we are in the Middle East and that's the reason why they attacked us, then why was the Muslim Brotherhood founded in 1928? At that time, Israel wasn't even in existence. There was no Israel in 1928. We had such an isolationist foreign policy that even in 1939, Newsweek magazine had on its front cover 50-50. 50% of Americans want to go to war with Hitler, and 50% of Americans said, we don't care what happens in Europe, we have the economy and jobs to worry about. They did not want to get involved in the war. That's how much of an isolationist policy we had. So why was the Muslim Brotherhood founded in 1928? It was founded to bring back the Islamic Caliphate or the Islamic Empire. And that happened 5 years after President Ataturk in Turkey ended the Islamic Empire, which had existed and ruled for 1400 years. So a group of Islamists in Egypt said, how can Christendom win over Islam? Islam ruled for 1400 years. How can the infidel defeat us? Therefore, we need to organize and revive the caliphate. That's why the Muslim Brotherhood was founded. So why should we be concerned about the Muslim Brotherhood? We should be concerned about the Muslim Brotherhood because the Muslim Brotherhood wrote a plan, a 100-year plan for radical Islam to infiltrate and dominate the West and establish an Islamic government on earth. In the counter-terrorism circles, this plan became known as the Project. What makes the Project so unique is they give tactics and proposals on how to infiltrate the West, how to dominate the West, how to use our laws against us, how to use our open-mindedness against us, how to use our tolerance against us, how to use buzzwords that make Westerners put their guard down because they're words like interfaith dialogue and multiculturalism and tolerance and open-mindedness and those kinds of words. They talk about how to set up non-profit organizations and human rights organizations and maintain an appearance of moderation in order to advance the Islamic agenda in the West. They talk about how to install interns inside elected officials in the West so they can have an insider view as to how politics is done on the highest level. They talk about how to get democratically elected Muslims in the West to all levels of government. They talk about how to work and use like-minded organizations, progressive organizations, in order to advance the radical Islamic agenda in the West. This is why, when you see the Council on American Islamic Relations, CARE, working with groups like the ACLU, you scratch your head and you think to yourself, how can these two people have anything in common? But the ACLU is being used by CARE as the useful idiots to advance the radical Islamic agenda in the United States. So, the Muslim Brotherhood began implementing their project in Europe in 1982. When you look at Europe in the last 30 years, Europe has morphed into Eurabia. It is no longer the Europe that you remember visiting 20, 30 years ago. It's a completely different place. We can see already how they used culturally, without firing a bullet, to advance the system from within. As I'm speaking to you right now, there are 84 Sharia courts operating in Britain alone, Islamic courts, parallel to British law. 85 Sharia courts operating in London alone. There are 725 no-go zone in France, where police is not even allowed to enter or is afraid to enter because these are Islamic zones. 725. Europe is changing right before our own eyes. So why should we be concerned in the United States? Because the Muslim Brotherhood wrote a plan for the United States in 1991. It's how to subdue America and how to sabotage America from within and destroy the country, using our own hands to destroy it. The plan was admitted into evidence in the Holy Land Foundation trial in Texas, the largest terrorism trial ever in the history of the United States, where America sued the Holy Land Foundation, the largest Islamic charity in America, and handed down 108 guilty verdicts against Muslim Americans who were raising millions of dollars in the United States and sending it overseas to support terrorist activities overseas. Here is the plan. It is titled مذكرة تفسيرية للهدف الاستراتيجي العام للجماعة في أمريكا الشمالية, an explanatory memorandum for the strategic goal for the group, which is the Muslim Brotherhood in America, written 5/22/1991. And I'm going to read you one paragraph that will give you an idea as to what they're talking about, their plans for the United States. The title of this paragraph is Understanding the Role of the Muslim Brother in North America. The process of settlement is a civilization jihadist process with all the word means. The Ikhwan, which is the Arabic word for brothers, must understand that their work in America is a kind of grand jihad in eliminating and destroying the Western civilization from within and sabotaging its miserable house by their hands and the hands of the believers, which is the religious Islamists, so that it is eliminated and Allah's religion is made victorious over all other religions. End quote. Is there anything vague in this paragraph? Do they beat around the bush? Are they hiding their agenda?
No.
They tell us exactly what they want to do. Our government knows about it. Our government admitted this as evidence in the largest terrorism trial in the history of the United States. It's not that our government is ignorant of this fact. The most important page of this document is the last page. And here's why. Because the last page lists 29 front Islamic organizations set up in the United States and maintain an appearance of moderation in order to advance the Muslim Brotherhood project in America in order to destroy our societies from within. And I'm going to read you a few names on this list because I know you are familiar with some of them and you have seen some of them on television. Number one on the list is ISNA, Islamic Society of North America. The reason why you are familiar with that name, ISNA, is because you watch them on television because they are now advisors to President Obama about Middle East policy. We not only have the Fox watching the hen house, we have the Fox inside the White House talking to the ear of the president. It was actually the president of ISNA is the person who wrote President Obama's speech, which he delivered in Cairo, his big publicized speech, his first address to the Islamic world. Number two on the list is the MSA, the Muslim Student Association. The Muslim Student Association has more chapters on American college campuses than the Democrats and the Republicans combined.
Oh my God.
And we wonder why we're losing our universities. Number eight on the list is NATE, the North American Islamic Trust. The North American Islamic Trust owns the deed to the majority of mosques in the United States. Number 22 on the list is IAP, Islamic Association for Palestine, which later became CARE, Council on American Islamic Relations. And to give you an idea as to how they are going about infiltrating our society and sabotaging it, I'm going to focus at this point on the education part. Because in this plan, they discuss how they're going to set up organizations, like I mentioned, 29 organizations in the country that focus on infiltrating every segment of our society. Media, politics, education, publishing, every single aspect of our society that you can imagine. As I'm speaking to you right now, CARE, the Council on American Islamic Relations, is building a $20 million studio in Hollywood. You think now is politically correct? Give them a few more years. So at this point, I want to focus on the education, and here is why. Because education is where the future of a country lies. Education is where you shape the future mind and the citizens of a nation.
Let me get my purse.
So this is how the Islamists began influencing our education system. Because of the oil wealth in Saudi Arabia and in the Middle East, the Islamists started pumping millions of dollars into our universities, setting up Middle East departments and political science departments, and appointing Arab professors who are anti-America and anti-Israel to brainwash our students. And this is the extent of the influence of Saudi peddling that has happened in our universities. The Saudis have donated $20 million to the University of Arkansas, $22 million to Harvard University from Saudi sheikhs linked to Al-Qaeda, $28.1 million to Georgetown, $5 million to MIT, $1.5 million to Texas A&M, $5 million to Rutgers University, $5 million to Columbia University. When Columbia, by the way, was asked about the source of the fund, they tried to lie to conceal the source of the funds. Other recipients of Saudi-tainted monies include UC Santa Barbara, Johns Hopkins University, Duke University, American University, UCLA, Howard University, and I can go on and on and on. you get the idea. From the Ivy Leagues to the community colleges and everything in between. We pump the gas and they pump poison into the hearts and minds of our future generations. And that's why we must become energy independent tomorrow and stop this nonsense. People ask me all the time, Brigitte, why is the media so biased? I mean, my gosh, God forbid you're watching CNN or CNN International. If you are on one of those cruise ships and you are stuck with nothing else to watch but CNN International, you're like about to pull your hair out. It's like watching Al Jazeera in English. There's nothing good in America. They apologize for America. America is evil. America is bad. America is, you know, imperialistic. They have nothing good to say about America. And I tell people, why are you surprised? Because for the last 16, 20 years, all these students graduating out of our elite universities who have been fed a steady diet of hate and resentment against America are now the news writers, the news makers, the bureau chiefs, the policy makers, the opinion shapers. And you wonder, just look at our president. We don't have a commander-in-chief, we have an apologizer-in-chief. I don't care whether you're black or white. I don't care whether you're a Democrat or a Republican. I believe a president of the United States should not apologize on behalf of America, especially to our enemies when he is overseas. The strategy worked so well on college campus that the Islamists figure out, why wait until the kids get to college? Why don't we start with them with middle school and high school? This way, by the time they get to college, they are 18 years old and they vote, and we have them in the palm of our hands. So the Islam Project was launched in 1991. And they started providing consultants to America's top publishers of textbooks for public schools, like Houghton Mifflin, Random House, McGraw-Hill, Apprentice Hall, that write social studies books and history books for public schools. And they started consulting with them on how to teach Islam in the public school system. So the Islam course began being introduced, it began in the state of California in 1991. And it began as a 3-week course where students had to study Islam for 3 weeks, adopt Islamic names to feel what it's like to become Muslims, recite and memorize verses from the Quran, and go to a mosque on a field trip. And when I started talking about this, people would say to me, oh, Brigitte, you're exaggerating. There is no way this could happen in the United States. After all, we have separation of church and state in this country. They can't be teaching about this. And I said, oh yeah? Well, there is nothing like show and tell. Here is the course. You can tell I've got some practice at this. Here is the course. The course began in 1991, as I mentioned. This course, called the Course of Islam, put out by an organization called Interact, copyrighted in 1991, put out by Interaction Publishers, Inc., doing business as Interact, located in California. This is the teacher instruction book. And here's how the teacher starts the instruction to the class. From the beginning, you and your classmates will become Muslims. You will be a member of a caravan. The teacher is already telling the students, okay, you all, from now until the next 3 weeks, you all are going to be Muslims. The teacher continues her instructions, or his instructions, by saying, dressing as a Muslim and trying to be involved will increase your learning and enjoyment. Finally, trying your best at all tasks will guarantee you an excellent grade and a more enjoyable time. The teacher is already dangling the great carrot in front of the students to encourage them to get involved in the class. Here are the list of names, the Islamic names that the students have to choose from. They've got boys' names and girls' names. Here are what they call wisdom cards. These are like cue cards to memorize the Islam lesson. You know, cue cards like in math, the students memorize their multiplication tables using cue cards. These are the cue cards for the Muslim lesson. And I'm going to read you one card. These are fact cards. And I chose this card in particular because it talks about jihad. We hear a lot about the word jihad. Jihad obviously plays a major role in Islamic terrorism because you hear Muslims who are about to blow themselves up say, we are dying fi sabili jihad, dying in the path of Allah. Suicide bombers before they blow themselves up, they talk about jihad. Islamic organizations are called Islamic Jihad. I mean, that's the name of their organizations. Or Al-Mujahideen, the fighters who are committing jihad. These are names of organizations. So obviously jihad is a very important role in Islamic terrorism. But here's what little Johnny and Sally are being taught about jihad in our public school system. A jihad is a struggle by Muslims against oppression, invasion, and injustice. And that's a fact part. Now, if these words sound familiar to you, it's because these are the talking points of Al-Qaeda. Every time Al-Qaeda issues a press release as to why they're fighting America, what do they say? We are fighting America because we are fighting invasion. We are fighting oppression. We are fighting injustice. Anytime you hear Palestinian suicide bombers about to blow themselves up and they record their last video, the poor freedom fighters who are becoming martyrs in order to fight for justice because they're dying, because they're fighting oppression and invasion and injustice. So what we have right now is our enemies writing the courses for our students, teaching them their talking points in our public school system paid for by our tax dollars. Do you see how smart they are in their strategy? Hitler made a very important statement. He said, give me the children, I will change society in 10 years. And that's exactly what he did. Look at America today, and look how different America is from the way America used to be 20 years ago. And that includes the patriotism of our sons and daughters. Even those who are raised in the heartland to conservative parents who love this country, who are so proud of this country, who would die for this country, who proudly hang their American flags in their front yards and on their porches and their yards. We send the kids to college, the kids come back opinionated, embarrassed of their parents, embarrassed of the country. This course began in 1991, over 20 years ago, 10 years prior to September 11th. Our enemy has been planning while we have been asleep at the switch. And while our government today talks to you about Al-Qaeda, oh, we defeated Al-Qaeda, most Al-Qaeda is defeated, the problem is over. Nobody's talking about this stuff. And our enemy knows exactly why we're not talking about this stuff, and we're not going to talk about it. They figured this is the best way to infiltrate a society. Eat it from within. And because I'm speaking at a church, I have to continue and share with you this little prayer that the students have to analyze in the classroom. This is called the Shahada prayer, which is when Muslims, when people convert to Islam. This is the equivalent of the salvation prayer for Christianity. I give my life to Jesus Christ as my Lord and Savior, etc. Here is the prayer that our students have to analyze in the classroom. Praise be to Allah, Lord of creation, the compassionate, the merciful, King of Judgment Day. You alone we worship, and to you alone we pray for help. Did I mention this is public school system? Guide us to the straight path, not the path of those who have the path of those who you have favored, which is the Muslims, not of those who have incurred your wrath, which is the Jews, nor of those who have gone astray, which is the Christians and the atheists. Can you imagine if Pastor Jay here decided to go to a public school system and teach the students, okay, you all, for the next 3 weeks, we're all going to study Christianity. You're going to memorize and recite verses from the Bible. You're going to adopt Christian names to experience what it's like to be a Christian. And I'm going to take you on a Sunday school, on Sunday to church, so you can experience what it's like to be a Christian. And oh, by the way, let's analyze the salvation prayer. I give my life to Jesus Christ and accept my Lord as my Savior. What do you think the ACLU would do? What do you think will happen in the school system? They'll be screaming to high heaven. Yet because it is Islam, nobody's saying anything. And don't get me wrong, I am an American. I believe in freedom of speech and freedom of religion and every other freedom we have. I have two children that went to public schools. I want my children to be educated about all religions. I want them to learn about Islam. I want them to learn about Judaism. I want them to learn about Hinduism. I want them to learn about Christianity. But I do not want my Christian indoctrinated into any religion in the public schools. Let me teach my kids at home about what I believe and I want my kids to follow. And I believe we need to throw political correctness in the garbage where it belongs and start following scripture. And I am sick and tired when people in this country criticize this country, see all the ills in America, do not see anything good in America. You know what? Nobody is perfect. No country in the world is perfect. We have our own shortcomings. But you know what? Last time I checked, America was the best country in the world and everybody was dying to that. I am sick and tired when I hear people say, I'm an African American, and I'm a Japanese American, and I'm a Chinese American, and I'm an Italian American, and I'm a Lebanese American. I am nothing but an American. All right. Get back to the bases in this country. Right. Immigrants that crossed the oceans to get here, who left tyranny, who left other countries where they did not have the freedoms that we had, gave everything to build this country for us. Our founding fathers went broke, and many of them died broke, so they can give us the freedoms that we have today. Amen. The least we can do is preserve it for our future generations. We do have the best country in the world. People came here and they taught their kids, no matter what language they spoke back at home, they came to America and they made sure their kids spoke English because they wanted to make their children speak the English language. And I believe today America is still English is still the official language of the United States and shall remain so. As you can tell, I don't beat around the bush.
No. That's right. That's good. That's good.
Any of you sensitive people, check your sensitivity sleeves out the door. You have entered the Brigitte Gabriel presentation. I believe this issue is so important. I'm going to show you how this is impacting, this type of education is impacting our children and our future in this country. I'm going to show you a video right now, a very short video, 10-minute video, called Losing Our Sons, to show you the effect of what I'm talking about with this presentation and how they are recruiting our sons into jihad. Please play the video and then I'll come back on stage and continue my comments. Please play the video, Losing Our Sons, and bring down the lights again. They're talking to you about. I mentioned to you the problem with the education. Act for America for the last 2 years launched the project. The project was called an education project where we analyzed textbooks that are being taught nationwide, 38 textbooks. And we issued a textbook report about what's happening in our country. The textbook was titled Education or Indoctrination. And we mailed the result of this report to over 70,000 elected school board members nationwide, saying to them, what are you going to do about the lies being taught in the textbooks across the country? We owe our children the truth. This report is up on our website. It took us 2 years to compile. The full report is 220 pages long. This is the executive summary. When you go on our website, actforamericaeducation.org, you can be able to see the report, the full report, download it, give it to your school board members. We already mailed it to them. Get involved in our local chapters, because what we're doing is not only we mail this to the school board members, but we also send it to our chapter leaders. So not only we apply pressure from the top down, but we apply pressure from the grassroots up, because the grassroots go out and vote for the elected school board members, and they can go in the community to them and say, Mr. Smith, we want to meet with you about this issue. Now that you are informed about what's happening in our textbooks, what are you going to do about it? Because if you're not going to fix the problem, we're going to get you out and make sure we elect somebody else instead of you next time to pay attention to the kids. That's what Act for America is doing. We now have 750 chapters nationwide with 260,000 members. I hope tonight we'll get more chapters and more members. What we are also doing is working on tightening our laws so that Islamists will not be able to use our laws against us. To give you an example, you heard about Sharia courts being used in Europe. You heard about Islamic laws, like here in America, everybody now they are trying to push Islamic laws. But most of you maybe have not realized that in America today, we have already had 53 cases judged under Sharia law and not under the Constitution of the United States. Because Islamists wanted to be judged under Islamic law and not under the Constitution. 53 cases nationwide. We launched a bill called ALAC, American Laws for American Courts, because we wanted to build firewalls and put this bill in every state. So when Muslims come in and say, I don't want to be judged under the Constitution because I'm a Muslim, a judge can say, you can't do that. Because in the state of Mississippi, we have a law that says only American laws will be used in American courts. Does this message resonate with you? I'm glad to tell you that we already passed ALAC in 4 states. We passed it in Arizona, Louisiana, Tennessee, Kansas. In Kansas, we mobilized and originated 30,000 phone calls because we sent an email to our members telling them that the bill is coming down for a vote, where they put pressure on their elected officials to pass it. The bill passed. 2 months later, a Muslim man came to court with some domestic something or other with his wife. He wanted to use Islamic law. The judge told him, sorry, in Kansas we have a bill, we have a law that says ALAC, American Laws for American Courts, you cannot use that. We want to make sure we do that in every single state, including yours. Now, do you think if Act for America did not exist, we would be able to be passing such bills?
No.
Have you heard anybody else talk about these issues the way I presented these issues to you tonight?
No.
No. That's why I launched Act for America. I named the organization Act for America, not think about America, not hope for America, not wish for America, but act for America. Because unless we act to protect our country now, we're going to lose our country 20 years from now.
That's true.
So that's what I here am today to speak to you about and seek your help. Number one, I want you to do when you came in tonight, under your seats, there were these sheets, 2 sheets under your seat. Please pull them out. One sheet, it says our email